even the likes of these little under-sink heaters can be really handy compared to somebody running over and back to the house looking to boil kettles and all that kind of thing. These type of things can save a good bit of time, I suppose. We're at the time of the year where getting any little bits of repairs or slight modifications to the sheep housing, now is the time. Standing back and trying to have a little bit more of an organised approach to your daily routine.
Hello, I'm Kieran Lynch and welcome to OviCast, the Teagasc Sheep podcast. Each episode, we'll bring you less insights, advice and technical updates for the sheep industry. In this week's episode, we're joined by sheep specialist Damian Costello discussing practical approaches to reducing labour demands during the winter housing and lambing period. Damian outlines some of the husbandry practices can minimise interventions with ewes later in the season, highlighting how planning early can pay dividends when workload is at its peak. We also explore the importance of shed layout, pen design and ventilation in creating a more efficient work environment. The discussion also covers a range of potential investments, from very simple low-cost investments to more significant upgrades, all aimed at making the day-to-day tasks easier and reducing pressure during this time of the year. It's a quiet time in many ways in the farm, but there's regular chores there to be done, and we can probably be a bit more labour efficient with how we approach some of them.
Yeah, thanks, Kieran. Yeah, absolutely. And I suppose, as you say, people are maybe on the point of housing, or maybe it's always a good time of the year maybe to have a look at the key elements of the sheep housing. You know, do you have enough of feed space in that all yours can eat at one time comfortably? Is there, are you set up so that there's a constant access to silage or whatever forage you're feeding? You know, have you a good setup so that one person can feed the ewes in a timely manner? And again, like, I mean, the other areas, I mean, very often we find maybe feed space is more of a limiting factor than lying space in a shed, but it is important that they have enough of lying space as well. And obviously the other elements that have a clean water supply and a well ventilated shed and plenty of properly lighting and sockets and all those, that it's timely to do those few checks, I suppose, before housing commences.
I suppose, Damien, like, we're talking about housing, there's several aspects of it that can kind of cut down on labour. Part of it is probably trying to minimise maybe some of the headaches we're going to get later on too, in terms of how we set our pens up and number of stock and that we've in them. You kind of plan a little bit ahead there.
You are, you know, I suppose a lot of the time, we'll say, we mentioned there about proper feeding, you know, proper feed space and a proper setup for feeding, and you know, like, I suppose getting the nutrition of the ewes in the shed right at all stages. I suppose the knock-on effect to that, from a labour point of view, is that when you reach lambing time, if you're keeping an eye on body condition score and you're taking out thinner ewes and giving them an extra bit of feeding and all of those sort of things reduce the workload. We all know the workload, I suppose, associated with a lot of with a thin ewe lambing down. So if you can keep the number of thinner ewes to a minimum, you're going to be reducing your labour at lambing time. But I suppose, as you mentioned, that's all conditional, I suppose, on having the right facilities in the first place. Like, so, I mean, at this stage, you're not going to be looking to totally redesign the internal layout of your shed. But I mean, could a couple of extra pen divisions in your shed enable you to take out these lesser conditioned ewes and feed them a little bit extra? You know, it allows you to split out your ewe flock by litter size, by lambing date, by body condition score. You know, equally, if feed space is an issue, you know, it might be as simple as purchasing a couple of hang-on trucks that will just give that extra 3 or 4 feed spaces that you need, that'll take the pressure off inside in each pen. So it's important maybe to measure the feed space in each pen and see that you are, like, I mean, as I say, we talk about dividing pens, possibly is a walk-through feed trough. Could you use that to divide larger areas and give yourself that extra bit of truck space? But as I say, it's not going to be a total redesign of the shed, but sort of those type of things that can help, you know.
Just changing up a wee bit. Look, I suppose you might say, how does that cut down labour? But it does cut down on when we come to lambing, maybe in late February, March. Look, we're talking about the sheds and setup. A lot of them are going to be embedded sheds as well, even though they're not, Damon. ventilation is probably another thing we need to consider, and particularly anyone will realise at the moment the damp conditions we're having adequate ventilation there can have a big impact on stock health, obviously, but certainly on bedding as well. Any kind of tips around what you could do there to improve that or check it at least?
So look at ventilation. Any farm buildings, I suppose, good ventilation is important, as you mentioned, from a health point of view. But also, if the ventilation is compromised in a sheep shed, in a straw-bedded sheep shed in particular, you will find it more challenging to you have that damp atmosphere. So the principles of of ventilation of a shed, I suppose, the animals inside in the shed are producing heat, so that warm air rises. It's lighter than cold air. So the idea would be on the long sides of a shed is your inlet, if you like. There's fresh air coming through there. The heat rising for the animals is taking the air up the way, and so you need a side inlet, I suppose, basically on the sides of the buildings, ideally, where fresh air is coming in, and it needs somewhere to go up on top as well. So whether that's a ridge cap or that, but very often we find maybe in sheep situations where maybe buildings were converted into a sheep shed, or that ventilation can be compromised. So you could be looking at, as I say, maybe removing a few sheets from an adjacent building where a shed is tucked between a number of buildings that might increase the inflow of air. Equally, I mean, even raising a few sheets on the roof, there's a little bit of work to it, but when you can raise a few sheets here and there around the roof, so that provides an outlet for that stale air that needs to escape. So look, as I say again, it's at the time of the year where you're not going to be doing a total reconstruction job, but it would be worth exploring a few of those type of areas. So basically, it's something to encourage air into the shed and also offer it an exit point as well.
Some simple modifications there can make a difference. Look, I suppose the other thing, David, we're talking modifications, you touched on already, like the repair work that has to be done, the jobs they're put on the long finger, whether it be sockets, water pipes, lighting even in certain cases. It's probably a good chance at the moment just to get some of them things done that just leave it a wee bit easier, a bit safer as well at this stage of the season.
Oh, absolutely. And look, as you say, it's not a time to discover. It's not a time to discover when you've just put in your sheep that there's a number of lights need replacing, or their socket's not working, or equally barriers. You might find your little access gate that you remembered towards the end of lambing last year, that there's a latch broken on that, and now you've realised that you still haven't repaired it. So having a check on those type of things and getting them done while time allows, that you're not putting yourself under pressure then when things get busier and the run up to lambing.
And so the other element that has to come into that too is look at just general work practice. Is there things we can do a little bit easier? Same routine jobs every day, even having a place to put things in is another thing that can cut down a bit on time.
There is definitely, and we know from our preliminary look at our recent labour survey that that it's more and more sheep farmers are going to be farming on a part-time basis now already, even into the future. Excuse me, but as you say, having as the old saying goes, having a place for everything and everything in its place. Even the implements and the scrapers and the forks and shovels and that you're using on a daily basis, that you have an area to store them, and that they're there when you need them. I suppose that you're not spending time walking around looking for them. Again, even a simple thing when it gets to the stage of feeding a bit of meal to the ewes pre-lambing in the shed, even the simple thing of having a meal bin or a trolley that you can have your buckets or bags pre-filled, we'll say, from the evening before. So it just cuts down that little bit of time in the morning to feed the sheep. Still a lot of people will be supplementary feeding meal to ewes outdoors as well. And again, having your half-ton meal bin with pre-filled bags there, getting that set up maybe at the weekend and having that left in the field adjacent to the tracks. All those kind of things are a time saver, that you have your meal filled in advance for a few days, and you can feed them. Again, mentioned about the importance of good handling facilities as well. Have your it's not something that's going to be put in place at this stage, but we would find that people that have a good batch footpath facility, that footpathing the ewes during the housing period is no big deal. And again, you're reducing labour long term by having those type of facilities in place, that you can let a pen of sheep out into the footpath, let them stand there, and get the sheep footpaths during a Saturday there when you're doing other jobs around the yard as well. So, but again, as I said, the important thing is having those facilities in place to enable you to get these jobs done in a timely manner.
Yeah, look, you're cutting down on some of the headaches maybe later on. Look, it'd be remiss me, we're in December, not to talk about potential investments on the farm as well that can cut down. And I suppose, look, this is the range from the very simple stuff that you can pick up for a couple of years up to the more expensive stuff that we might be considering in terms of upgrading feeding equipment or bedding equipment. There's a range there, Damien, in the moment, but maybe if we're looking long term at where we can kind of make investments, there is some of them things that can leave life a lot easier, from the bigger gear, as I said, to some of the smaller investments you can make. Maybe talk to me a little bit about that.
Yeah, I mean, when you talk about kind of labor saving equipment in terms of machinery, I mean, there's a range of stuff there, from the bale unwinders and the bale slicers and all those, some of which are Thames funded at the minute. And again, for people that are working, I suppose all these things are a help, and they're probably something you're not going to be buying them every year. You do get to use out of a good number of years. Again, look, it's very much dependent, Kieran, I suppose, on the scale of operation and the number of sheep you're feeding, and also I suppose that your housing is suitable for the use of this type of equipment. So do a bit of research, I suppose, before you make any of these kind of purchases. Like the other one is the straw chopper and blower, and which some of those bits of kit will equally feed out your own bales of silage as well. So again, these are options for some people, and certainly they're labour saving. Albeit at a cost. Some of this equipment has gone up a good bit in price in recent years. But again, I think the important thing maybe is to talk to other people that are using them, and do a bit of research before you make any decision on it. There's some of them where a second tractor or loading gear maybe required in order to get the full value out of them, I suppose. But even in terms of the smaller investments, Kieran, as maybe we look ahead to lambing, little bits and pieces like having a hot water supply in the lambing shed, and maybe a little bit of shelving and a workstation, and that to hold your equipment, and even the likes of these little under sink heaters, €200 or €300. You won't spend an awful lot more than that on getting a hot water source, and it can be really handy compared to somebody running over and back to the house looking to boil kettles and all that kind of thing. These type of things can save a good bit of time, I suppose. The other thing we've seen people, a big labour saving is in terms of providing maybe a water supply to the individual pens. The cheap and cheerful way, I suppose, is a 100mm plastic pipe with a number of holes cut out so the sheep can drink from that, and that you're piping a water supply into it, so you can have that for the full length of your shed if you have a line of individual pens. Obviously, you can put self-filling drinking bowls in each of your individual lambing pens as well, but that's the more expensive option, I suppose. And even, I suppose, at a very minimum, having a barrel filled with water all the time for if you're on the bucketing water into the individual pens. So, there's just maybe those are little things that possibly can be still put in place for this year in advance of the lambing. For most people are lambing in the March period, so it's still something that can be done, considered.
Well, again, Damien, like it just requires a wee bit of forward planning for some of them, and getting that good
Absolutely,
event,
yeah.
and getting somebody, maybe some of them might want an external person to come in and just get you set up with. But again, all stuff that can save them a couple of minutes here and there and just make the job a bit more pleasant and
Well,
easy.
well, this is it, and I mean,
And
there are studies there to show that 20 to 25% of the annual labour on a sheep farm takes place around the time of the lambing. So, I suppose every little bit helps in that situation in terms of reducing labour.
oh, definitely. I suppose, look, we're talking about lamb and labour. One other great thing will crop up at that stage here is rare and artificial lambs, and it's probably another area we can look at. Can we make that job a bit easier? It's kind of a par for the course on most farms that there's going to be some pets there every year to feed. There is equipment there that can make that a bit easier. That could be a good investment for some.
Yeah, absolutely. And look at it. I mean, it can be as simple as a few, setting up a pen with a few lambing gates. You're looking at about zero point 0.6 of a meter squared per lamb of a space allowance, which isn't very much. Look at there's a range of basic ad lib feeders on the market that will comfortably rear 20 to 25 lambs. With a cost ranging probably in the region of anywhere between 250 and €500. If you're talking about larger numbers, larger flocks, and particularly higher scanning flocks, there are automated systems, but again, could set you back 3 or 4 thousand. But you'd need to have a good number of lambs a good number of surplus lambs to rear. But that is pretty much automated, where it's plumbed into a water supply, and you've constant hot milk, so you're pretty much just adding the milk powder to that system. But look, there's lots of people out there that would benefit from some sort of a basic ad lib feeder that will just keep the milk warm, and once you get lambs trained into it, and that it's
Cut down the job a wee bit.
yeah, absolutely, yeah.
Look, other investments that we kind of key around that time of year, like we're generally short either in case of pens maybe, or just basic consumables. Not big investments, some of them, Damien, but can also help around that stage of the season.
Absolutely, yeah. And like I say, we always talk about maybe in the run up to lambing times stocking up on the essentials, but even a couple of the smaller things that we've seen on farms, like the likes of having a whiteboard in the lambing in the sheep shed or the lambing shed, especially if there's people coming giving you a bit of help, like that you can even simple things like a few notes on. Ewes that have lambed over the last few hours when someone's away, that there's some weak lamb in pen one or whatever it might be, or even the simple thing of writing down the feeding level that each sheep are on, if you're getting somebody in to feed the sheep for a day or two or something like that in the run up to lambing. Even look at simple things like having little buckets or boxes that are stocked up with the critical supplies that you need around the lambing time, like your iodine or your naval disinfectant, and other bits and pieces that you need when you'd be coming to turn out, like your rubber rings and your applicator, and but having a couple of those kits made up, and also obviously your hygiene, your arm length gloves, and all these different supplies, and having those stocked up, I suppose, and having them in a place where you know they are. And if you're dealing maybe with two different sheds where you have sheep lambing, that you can have a supply for each shed, like. And even the simple thing of having a few spare lambing gates, or that it's particularly busy, that you can grab two lambing gates if she's just corner off the sheep in the pen she's lambing in. It'll buy you a bit of time until you can get her moved to an individual pen. But little things like that, as you say, not really big investments, Kieran, but just making things a little bit more streamlined and a bit more organised.
All useful, all the same, Damien.
It's always a help, yeah.
Look, so maybe just to wrap it up, like probably something we don't do is maybe just stand back sometimes and look at what we're doing on a daily basis and see, is there any of the areas we can improve?
Absolutely, yeah. Look, I mean, as I say, it's we're at the time of the year where, as we mentioned earlier on, getting these any little bits of repairs or slight modifications to the sheep housing, now is the time. As you say, standing back and trying to have a little bit more of an organised approach to your daily routine, and look at, as I say, the couple of investments. Obviously, the large investments are something that people will be considering on an individual basis. But there are small investments there that, if you put a little bit of thought into them, there's no reason why they wouldn't be in place for the coming lambing season, and hopefully will make things run a bit smoother at that time.
Damian, good having you on. Definitely useful thing to think about at the moment, and look, we'll chat to you again.
Thank you, Kieran.
We'll leave it there for this week's episode. I'd like to thank Damian again for coming on once again. There's something probably in every farm that we could look at and say, yeah, that could be done a bit easier. I think you highlight a number of key areas to focus on. That's it for me. For updates from our sheep programme, keep an eye on our Twitter page at Teagasc Sheep. I'm Kieran Lynch. Thanks for joining us. Don't forget to subscribe and follow us wherever you get your podcasts.